We're marching design. Sing verses 1, 2, and 4. We're marching design. Number 2 in the sacred selections. Come we that love the Lord and let our joys be known. Join in a song with sweet accord. Join in a song with sweet accord. And thus around the throne. And thus around the throne. We're marching to Zion. Beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to Zion, the beautiful city of God. Let those refuse to sing who never knew our God. The children of the heavenly King, the children of the heavenly King, may speak their joys abroad, may speak their joys abroad. We're marching to Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to Zion, the beautiful city of God. Then let our songs abound, and every tear be dry. We're marching through Emmanuel's ground. We're marching through Emmanuel's ground to fairer worlds on high, to fairer worlds on high. We're marching to Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to Zion, the beautiful city of God. Number 95, the last mile of the way, 95. Again, we'll do verses 1, 2, and 4. If I walk in the pathway of duty, if I work till the close of the day, I shall see the great King in his beauty when I've gone the last mile of the way. When I've gone the last mile of the way, I will rest at the close of the day, and I know there are joys that await me when I've gone the last mile of the way. If for Christ I proclaim the glad story, if I seek for a sheep gone astray, I am sure he will show me his glory when I've gone the last mile of the way. When I've gone the last mile of the way, I will rest at the close of the day, and I know there are joys that await me when I've gone the last mile of the way. And if here I have earnestly striven, and tried all is well to obey, will enhance all the rapture of heaven when I've gone the last mile of the way. When I've gone the last mile of the way, I will rest at the close of the day, and I know there are joys that await me when I've gone the last mile of the way. It's convenient we might stand. Brother Jordan, would you raise the word of prayer, please?
Dear God, thank you for love. We thank you for all the blessings that we have in Christ. Please be with us this evening as we study some of your word. Help us have an open mind and to grow spiritually and to leave here in a better place spiritually. Thank you for everyone who decided to come out tonight. Thank you for their willingness to come and focus on you. And the ones that are sick, we pray that you will be with them. We hope that they get better. We know that you know everything and that you are very powerful. And it is a blessing to pray to you, and we're so thankful that you love us and hear us and forgive us. Thank you for leaders of this congregation. I ask that you provide your wisdom in making decisions and to be of Wade tonight as he teaches. We're thankful for all the members. We're so thankful for the love that's here. We pray in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you.
.408 will be our closing song. 408.
408, is that what you
Yes.
said? Is that the unclouded day?
Yes, it is.
How about that? All right, tonight we're going to be getting into the second chapter of Daniel. Last week we looked at the first chapter, which tells us a little bit about the background of the four main characters, well, four of the five main characters in the book. Daniel and his three friends were four young men taken from Judah. They were taken in that first wave of captives when Jerusalem was first conquered by Nebuchadnezzar in 605 BC. And we saw in that first chapter how they distinguished themselves by refusing to eat from the king's table. We talked about how there was a high probability that some of the food that Nebuchadnezzar would have available at his table, it could very well have been not sacrificed, but offered to idols. So the potential taint of idolatry, as well as their desire to maintain what we call a kosher diet, avoiding things like pork, for example, that just made this a good choice on their part, but it carried some risk. And as we noted last week, when they made this proposal, the man who was in charge was like, well, I don't want to get in trouble with the king if we do this. So it came with some risks, but because of their integrity, God blesses them with good health and much more. He blesses them with knowledge, with wisdom, and abilities that just help them to outshine their peers. And we noted at the end of chapter 1 how Daniel was given the gift of interpreting dreams, just like Joseph. And we talked about some of the parallels between Joseph and Daniel, two men who were far from home, taken captive, who rose very quickly into the upper echelons of power in both of their respective lands. Joseph became the number 2 man in Egypt, and we're going to see next week when we study chapter 6, Daniel was in the very highest echelons of Persian power. He was just beneath the emperor. So these were two men who had this ability, and there's a lot of other parallels we can point out, including that Pharaoh had a dream that Joseph interpreted for him. And tonight, Nebuchadnezzar has a dream that Daniel interprets for him. So lots of parallels between those two guys. I got a lot to cover, so we're going to just jump right into chapter 2. And chapter 2 begins in the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, and his spirit was so troubled that his sleep left him. Then the king gave the command to call the magicians, the astrologers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans to tell the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king, and the king said to them, I have had a dream, and my spirit is anxious to know the dream. Then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever, tell your servants the dream, and I will give the interpretation. Now, notice there in verse number 4 how the Chaldeans spoke to him in Aramaic. That would be the language that is dominant in this part of the world. And this is one of the interesting things about the book of Daniel. And actually among some Jewish rabbis, they look down on Daniel for this particular aspect. From chapter 2, verse 4 to the end of chapter 7, verse 28, this portion of Daniel is written entirely in Aramaic. It's not actually in Hebrew, which is kind of interesting. It may give us some indication of when it was written down. Perhaps it was written down right around the time that all these things were happening. So when it notes that they spoke to him in Aramaic, it's almost like this little clue that, hey, this text is going to be in Aramaic for the next 5 chapters. But what we see is Nebuchadnezzar requesting help from diviners, from people who practice divination. Divination is the practice of interpreting signs, symbols, or omens to gain insight or knowledge about the future. We talked about this just a little bit last week. For example, some people thought that they could look at animal entrails and make some sort of determination as to what decision was best to make for the future. This is called, well, I'm not going to try to pronounce that here. It's spicy at the end, right? It's extra spicy. There we go. Kind of sounds like extra spicy. But anyway, so they thought they could read animal entrails and discern something about what decision was best. They would also drop oil into water, and the patterns that the oil formed in the water, this was observed. This is called lacanomancy, right? Yeah, I'm not going to even try on this next one. There's also the interpretation of dreams, which we touched on a little bit last week, and then of course we revisited here just a moment ago. And of course another big part of divination is astrology, right? Looking to the stars, determining the supposed influence of heavenly bodies on the destiny of a person or nation. Those of you that grew up in the 60s remember the song, "This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius," right? And that's astrology, right? Because there's this time approaching when that particular constellation is going to be in a dominant place in the sky, right? And of course, there's also necromancy, which is the consultation of the dead. You remember in the story of Saul, Saul goes to a medium and wants to talk with the spirit of Samuel. Of course, the medium is kind of shocked that Samuel actually appears, but that medium was practicing divination, the art of necromancy, consulting the dead. All right, so Nebuchadnezzar has this dream. He calls in all the wise men, and they're sort of known by the name Chaldeans, which is an old name, an old Hebrew name for the Babylonian people. And whenever you see Chaldeans in this chapter, it almost always just kind of refers to this group of wise men, supposed wise men. And their response is, all right, Nebuchadnezzar, tell us the dream, and we'll tell you what it means. Well, Nebuchadnezzar has a different idea. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, "My decision is firm. If you do not make known the dream to me and its interpretation, you shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made an ash heap. However, if you tell the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts, rewards, and great honor. Therefore tell me the dream and its interpretation." They answered again and said, "Let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will give its interpretation." The king answered and said, "I know for certain that you would gain time, because you see that my decision is firm. If you do not make known the dream to me, there is only one decree for you. For you have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me till the time has changed. Therefore, tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can give me its interpretation." The Chaldeans answered the king and said, "There is not a man on earth who can tell the king's matter. Therefore, no king, lord, or ruler has ever asked such things of any magician, astrologer, or Chaldean. It is a difficult thing that the king requests, and there is no other who can tell it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh." All right, so you've got a bunch of guys that all of a sudden are sitting on the hot seat, right? Nebuchadnezzar, he says, describe the dream and give me the interpretation.
I'm not going to tell you the dream. I want you to tell me the dream. That way I know that you actually understand what the dream means. The Chaldeans are like, wait a second. This isn't how it works, Nebuchadnezzar, right? That's not how it works. Nebuchadnezzar's response is, well, I don't trust you guys. You're always moving the goalposts. And by that, this is the way these guys work, right? Well, they changed the terms of the agreement. That's how these magicians operate. And the Chaldeans respond, well, what you demand is impossible for man. No king anywhere at any time has made such a demand. So we had a disagreement. A disagreement that makes Nebuchadnezzar quite angry. He's angry, he's very furious, and he gives the command to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree went out, and they began killing the wise men, and they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. Then with counsel and wisdom, Daniel answered Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. He answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree from the king so urgent? Then Arioch made the decision known to Daniel. So Daniel went in and asked the king to give him time that he might tell the king the interpretation. Then Daniel went to his house and made the decision known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, that they might seek mercies from God of heaven concerning his secret, so that Daniel and his companions might not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. And the secret was revealed to Daniel in a night vision, so Daniel blessed the God of heaven. So here's Daniel's bargain. Nebuchadnezzar, give me more time. Nebuchadnezzar is executing all of these priests who refuse to the terms. Daniel convinces the king to give him a little bit of time. And he and his 3 friends plead with God to give them both the dream and the interpretation. So they're turning to God and asking God to help them. And God responds. Daniel is able to see the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, and God provides him with a interpretation. Now notice the way the scripture puts that. This is kind of an interesting little wrinkle in the story. Scripture says Daniel sees the dream in a vision. And this can kind of become a bit of a confusing topic because dreams and visions seem to be sort of the same thing in some respects, but they're actually just a little bit different. So prophetic dreams happened while people were sleeping. It happened in the case of Nebuchadnezzar. He was asleep, he had this dream. That's what happened with Pharaoh back in Genesis chapter 41, verse 1. Pharaoh had this dream about the 4 fat cows and the 4 lean cows, right? And he told that dream to Joseph, and Joseph interpreted what the dream meant. Daniel also had a dream in Daniel chapter 7, verse 1, and he also had visions. So there does seem to be a distinction between the two. Dreams happen when one is sleeping, but visions seem to be a dreamlike state that happens when you're awake. One comparison I've heard, and I think this is a pretty good one, it's like going to the IMAX theater. Have you ever been to one of those IMAX theaters with the surround sound and the surround movie? It's a very immersive experience, right? And, you can, depending on what you're seeing, people might actually move around with the scene as it's unfolding before them. Or if you've ever seen those virtual reality headsets, right? If you've ever watched someone play with one of those, they're in a whole different experience, right, than you are. Even though you're in the same room, they're awake and they're seeing something that you can't see, and they're responding to that thing. I think that's probably what a vision was like. This person was awake, but they were seeing things in the spiritual realm, and even in some cases being carried away from one place to another. Ezekiel talks about being carried in a vision from the land of Babylon back to Jerusalem. Now, he was still physically in Babylon, but in this vision, he is spiritually transported back to Jerusalem. So, dreams happen while one is asleep, visions happen while one is awake, but dreams and visions tend to operate in a lot of the same ways. A lot of the same types of symbolism, representation comes out in both of them. Another thing I just want to point out is we have an occurrence of a mystery. It's referred to as a mystery. Actually, in the New King James, it's called a secret. That word is used 2 different times to describe Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Now, the Aramaic word was actually borrowed from the Persian language. Isn't that confusing? So it's in the Hebrew Bible, but it's written in Aramaic, and the Aramaic borrows a word from the Persian. That's quite a little route there. The Persian word is raz, but if you go over to the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament, it's the Greek word mysterion. And if you look closely at mysterion, it looks a lot like an English word. Mystery, right? You can kind of see how we get mystery from mysterion. Basically, what this collection of words, what all of these words refer to, is special or restricted knowledge of the heavens and what is to happen in the future. Now, in the New Testament, several different times in the New Testament, Jesus and the apostles refer to mysteries about the kingdom of heaven. Now, this isn't like an Agatha Christie novel. It's not mystery in that sense. But rather, this is a revealing of the secret purpose of God. So oftentimes, you'll hear the book of Daniel described as a piece of apocalyptic literature. Now, the word apocalypse to us, in the way people use it popularly, apocalypse tends to refer to like the end times. But actually, the Greek word, I'm not going to be able to say it now. Ariana was practicing this earlier. Apocalypsis, I think that's close. That word just means to reveal or to uncover. That's all that means. So something that is hidden, God is uncovering or revealing. So think of this dream as God uncovering some secret knowledge that he wants Nebuchadnezzar to know. So this is what Daniel, in part, I think, has been placed in this position to do. God has a message to communicate to the most powerful man, perhaps in the world, but at least in this part of the world. He has a message to communicate to this man, and Daniel is going to help get that message across. So Daniel receives the dream, he receives the interpretation, he goes to the captain of the guard, and the captain of the guard takes Daniel to Nebuchadnezzar. And Daniel addresses Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel chapter 2, verses 31 through 35, and he describes the dream. He says, "You, O king, were watching, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose splendor was excellent, stood before you, and its form was awesome. The image's head was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, and its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. You watched while a stone was cut out without hands, which struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed together and became like chaff from the summer threshing floors. The wind carried them away so that no trace of them was found, and the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth." Quite a dream. You can look up online, find various artists' rendition of what this image may have looked like. I found this one. I thought this was pretty good. You can kind of see, get a sense of what it might have looked like. But again, we're just, making a guess here. So head of gold, arms and chest of silver, thighs of bronze, and legs of iron, and feet of iron mixed with clay. So here's this vision, and you can understand why Nebuchadnezzar was so confused by it. So Daniel interprets the dream, and he begins with this head of gold. "You, O king, are a king of kings. For the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. And wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field, or the birds of the heaven, he has given them into your hand, and he has made you ruler over them all. You are this head of gold." Now, I'm really thankful for how explicit Daniel is in this interpretation, because by identifying Nebuchadnezzar as being represented by the head of gold, this really helps solve the rest of the image. So the gold is roughly equal to Babylon, to the empire that Nebuchadnezzar has created. And as you look back in the annals of history, what you find out is that Nebuchadnezzar had turned Babylon into the crown jewel of the ancient world. A lot of people talk about Rome, and that's especially the case here in the West, where Rome was so influential on Western Europe, and a lot of our legal tradition has been handed down from the Roman Empire. But really, when you talk about the cities of the ancient world, Babylon's really the crown jewel. It's the one everybody wanted to conquer. In fact, we'll talk about Alexander the Great here in just a moment, but Alexander the Great made his capital in Babylon once he was done with all of his conquering. Under Nebuchadnezzar, the city of Babylon reached its height. It was roughly 500 acres in size, with about 100,000 people. And that might not sound like a lot of people, but remember, there's a lot fewer people in the world back then than there are now. So a city of 100,000, like Columbia, that doesn't seem like it's all that big, but at that time, this was a significant city. It was a 4-square city, surrounded by a wall that was reported to be 311 feet tall. Yeah. Herodotus tells us, the ancient historian, tells us you could drive 4 chariots along the top of the wall, side by side. That's how wide it was at the top. Yeah, it was massive. And purportedly, it was 42 to 56 miles long. So, quite a wall. Now, I haven't sat down to do the calculations to see if all these numbers work out. I'm just pulling these from various sources. But it's a big wall. It's a big city. And at the center of the city was a 650-foot ziggurat. And this was the tallest building in the ancient world. 650 feet is actually taller than the Great Pyramid at Giza. So this is quite a structure. Of course, a ziggurat it is a pyramid, right? It's just one of those step pyramids. We looked at pictures of those months ago at this point.
A story is roughly 10 feet, so that would be about 65 stories.
Yes. Yeah. And just kind of for reference, I think the Washington Monument's like 555 feet tall. So we're talking about a structure that's 100 feet taller than the Washington Monument. So, yeah, very impressive. Of course, Babylon was known in the ancient world for its hanging gardens. We have no evidence of this other than the testimony of ancient historians. But Nebuchadnezzar was responsible for building these hanging gardens, and they were apparently quite something. We just have little to no physical evidence of their existence. Just to give you a sense of how big the Babylonian Empire became, this is, me and my maps. I love my maps, right? But as you can see, it dominated the entire Fertile Crescent. I mean, that's basically the Fertile Crescent. That's the shape of the Empire of Babylon. Going clear down south of Judah, stretching down into the Sinai Peninsula. They never conquered Egypt. They never were able to get into Egypt. I think the Egyptians may have paid them tribute, but they never took territory from them. So Babylon was a significant empire, and Nebuchadnezzar became the most powerful ruler of his time in the Near East. He was the greatest warrior, statesman, and builder in all the succession of Babylonian kings after Hammurabi himself. Hammurabi, there we go. Yeah, I think I said that right. Several of my quotations come from a series of books written by Will Durant. And if you're ever looking for a historian that's easy to read, ancient history that is, Will Durant's pretty good. I've really benefited from reading his books, and he's very readable, which is not always the case with historians. Sometimes they can be pretty dry. Not Will Durant, he's a pretty good writer. Anyways, so Nebuchadnezzar was really the apex of the Babylonian kingdom. But after him, Daniel says, after his kingdom shall arise another kingdom that is inferior. And we go from a head of gold to a chest and arms of silver. Silver is a valuable metal, but it's less valuable than gold. And that's why Daniel says this kingdom is inferior to you. The head of gold shows us value and how God perceives this kingdom. Moving down, we notice that each of these metals is valuable, but it's less precious, right? Gold is more valuable than silver. Silver is more valuable than bronze. Bronze, of course, is more valuable than iron. All valuable metals, but less desirable as you move from the head down to the feet. So what we're learning is that each of these kingdoms is just a little bit less in stature, so to speak. And you can't really measure that by the length of their existence. Because as you evaluate a nation or an empire, you have to look at more things than how long they lasted. There's just more to the story than that. Anyways, so as we progress down the body parts become inferior as well. The head houses the brain, the chest houses the heart, and so on and so forth. All right, so who is this kingdom that follows Babylon that is inferior to it? Well, it's the kingdom that sometimes is called the Medo-Persian, but more often than not, if you're reading a book about ancient history, they're just going to refer to it as the Persian Empire. Okay? But for a time, the Medes had a large, prominent role in this empire. In fact, later on in Daniel chapter 5, verse 28, the king of Babylon is throwing a party. He's drinking he's using all the utensils from the temple, and that hand appears and writes on the wall. Remember this story, right? And part of the message from God, Daniel's called in. He interprets what's written on the wall, and Daniel tells the king, your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians. And we're told that Babylon fell that night. What the text doesn't tell us is that the king's throwing a party inside Babylon, but the city is surrounded by the Medes and the Persians. So the city is under siege, and the king's having a good time inside. That just kind of gives you an idea of how far things had degraded after Nebuchadnezzar. All right, so silver represents the Medes and the Persians. The chest represents the union of two great cultures. So you have one arm for the Medes, the second for the Persians. The chest binds those two powers together. So two powers that flow into one, if you will. And in 538 BC, Cyrus the Great conquers Babylon and installs Darius the Mede as his viceroy of Babylon. You can read about Darius in Daniel chapter 5, verse 31. So the next big kid on the block following Babylon are the Medes and the Persians. But we'll just refer to them as the Persians because that's what history refers to them as. This is the Persian Empire about 500 BC, and you'll notice it's significantly larger than the Empire of Babylon. You know, Babylon is basically consisted of this area right here, right? Persia conquered quite a bit more territory, going all the way over to India. They attempted to invade Greece, but weren't very successful in that. They actually did get down into Egypt, clear over to what we call Libya. So it's a much bigger empire in terms of its landmass. It's a great empire, but it's flawed. Remember, each kingdom is inferior in some respects from its predecessor. It's a great kingdom, but it's a flawed kingdom. As you look at the annals of history, what you learn is that under Cyrus the Great, Persia was an admirable empire, well governed, and Cyrus was succeeded by several good emperors. But when you get to Xerxes, who is the Ahasuerus of the book of Esther, once you get to Xerxes, you begin to see decay in the Persian Empire. And one of the reasons why it decayed was because they were ruled by terrible emperors. One historian by the name of Prideaux puts it this way: the kings of Persia were the worst race of men that ever governed an empire. Well, all right. That just gives you an idea of why they were a bit inferior. A lot of nations, a lot of great empires are known for their historic victories in battle. The Persians are actually known for their historic defeats in battle. They had some monumental military losses. I brought up maybe last week, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, the battle at Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans held off the Persians for a couple of days. All the Spartans, except for one, as I recall, died. But they held the Persian army, which was huge, at bay so that the rest of the Greek city-states could get organized to defend the homeland. And this is just one of many examples of the, how shall I say it, the poor reputation of the Persian Empire. Let's just put it that way. Yeah. And just to kind of fill this out a little bit more, Durant, in his book, Our Oriental Heritage, writes this about the Persians. Eating became the principal occupation of the aristocracy. These men who had once made it a rule to eat but once a day now interpreted the rule to allow them one meal, prolonged from noon to night. They stocked their larders with 1,000 delicacies and often served entire animals to their guests. They stuffed themselves with rich rare meats and spent their genius upon new sauces and desserts. A corrupt and corrupting multitude of menials filled the houses of the wealthy, while drunkenness became the common vice of every class. By the way, Durant was writing back in the 1930s, so he's not, approaching 100 years old, which is something to think about. But anyways, he's not super long ago. So he's writing from a modern perspective, looking back, and he basically said the Persians got too fat, too happy, and indulged themselves way too much. And some of the depictions of the Persians in modern movies really kind of land on that depiction, that they were just profligate, indolent, indulgent. That's what ultimately led to their decay. All right, so Babylon's followed by Persia. Persia is followed by a third kingdom represented by bronze. And the statement is made, it shall rule over all the earth. Now, bronze represents the Greek Empire. The Greeks were known for their bronze armor by the ancient world. We talked about this when we looked at David and Goliath, how Goliath had armor of bronze. That was a very Greek sort of thing. And of course, the great name associated with the Greeks is Alexander the Great. And he is perhaps I don't know if he'd be the greatest general of all time. I think Genghis Khan might have a leg up on him. He conquered more territory. It could be argued, and I'm sure there'd be a great debate out there somewhere on YouTube about the two. But anyways, Alexander the Great set out from Greece with an army of 32,000 infantry and 5,000 cavalry. And he began one of the most renowned military campaigns in history. In 7 years, he conquered all the way from Greece to India. 7 years. That's astonishing when you consider that they're traveling by foot and by horseback. That's just amazing. And that's how much he conquered in 7 years. It's just really astounding. So stretching all the way from Greece over to India, down into Egypt, and up to the Caucasus there in Armenia. So just an amazing feat. But the thing that made Greece an inferior empire to Persia was it was all about Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great had no successor. He chose no one to follow him, and he ended up dying at a very, very young age. After his death, his generals fought amongst themselves, and basically what ended up happening was four of his greatest generals took the empire that Alexander the Great had conquered and divided it into 4 parts. So it was an impressive but very short run. And what Alexander managed to accomplish in a short period of time did not last. It was short-lived. All right, so we've gone from Persia to Greece. And now we get into the fourth kingdom, and we're given more information about this kingdom than any other, and I think there's a reason behind that. So the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. And like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others. Whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. Yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay. And the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. And you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay. They will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. The iron seems to represent the era of what I'm going to call the Roman Republic. The Roman Republic, as observed by Durant, rested finally on the most successful military organization in history. So Rome was a republic ruled by a senate for the first, 500, 600 years of its existence, something like that. It's not till you get to Julius Caesar that you have the first emperor, but that's pretty short-lived. It's really not till you get to Octavius Augustus that you see the empire come into its full form. That happens around 44 BC, if my memory serves me correct. So we're talking about this earlier era, the Roman Republic. And they really take the Greeks' place as the power in the Mediterranean world. From their tribal days forward, Romans learned those military virtues which made them preeminent among their neighbors in the art of war, even in a warlike age. So the thing that set Rome apart from all others is they were a ferocious army in battle. And I think this next quotation really sums it up well. The army of the Republic lost battles, but it never lost a war. Men molded by stoic education and brutal spectacles to a contemptuous familiarity with death carved out the victories that conquered Italy, then Carthage and Greece, and then the Mediterranean world. That's a great quotation. I think it sums up the attitude, the spirit, sort of the mentality of Rome. They lost battles, but they never lost a war. This was a ferocious nation. But as I said a moment ago, the Republic gave way to the Empire. And I think this is what is represented by the iron mixed with clay. So Rome eventually conquered other nations. It conquered Carthage. It conquered Greece. And its conquering kept moving farther and farther east. And eventually Rome forms an empire. It's got several nations that it rules over. And as is noted, there seems to be implied in the interpretation of the dream that as it mixes with other nations, it becomes weaker. They will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. What this seems to imply is that as Rome expanded and it brought more and more of those foreign nations under its umbrella, it also made those foreign nations, more and more, made them citizens. In 293 BC, there were 165,000 citizens of the Roman Republic. By 47 AD, that's around the time that Paul would have been writing the book to the Galatians, right around that period of time. By 47 AD, that number reached nearly 7 million. These figures, according to this historian, this is from Meyer's Ancient History. This is an old history, but it's really, really good. These figures embody what is perhaps the most important matter in Roman history, namely the gradual admission of unprivileged commoners and of aliens to the full rights of the city, until every freeman in the civilized world had become a citizen of Rome. Now, this, of course, we're looking at this from a very different point of view from our vantage point, but it's generally agreed upon that as Rome spread, as it welcomed more and more citizens, that essentially diluted what Rome had built by itself. And that's what seems to be represented as by the iron mixed with clay. Now here's the reason why I think God gives us a lot more information about the Roman Empire than he did the previous empires. It's because of what's said in verses 44 and 45. And in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Inasmuch as you saw that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure. So there is one more kingdom that is represented in this dream. It's the eternal kingdom. The stone that's cut out of the mountain without hands represents Jesus Christ. And I love what Jesus says in Matthew 21, verse 44, because it matches up with what precisely we see happening in this dream. Jesus says in Matthew 21:44, and whoever falls on this stone, verse 42, will be broken. But on whomever it falls, it will grind him to powder. Who is the stone? Powder, pardon me. The stone is Jesus. And what does Jesus do to those who resist him? He grinds them down into powder. What happens to this statue? It strikes the feet, and then what does it do to the rest of the image? The stone grinds it to what? To powder. Just a nice little link up there between those two. The stone grows into a mountain. I believe the mountain represents the kingdom of heaven. You all just studied Hebrews chapter 12. This may be my favorite passage in the entire New Testament. But you have come to Mount Zion and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, to an innumerable company of angels, to the general assembly and church of the firstborn who are registered in heaven, to God the judge of all, to the spirits of just men made perfect, to Jesus the mediator of the new covenant, and to the blood of sprinkling that speaks of better things than that of Abel. I love that passage. He's talking about the kingdom of heaven, the church. The church is the mountain that grew out of the stone. It began with Jesus, but what did Jesus usher in? He ushered in the kingdom of heaven here upon earth. And it's grown into a worldwide kingdom. You can find Christians all over the world, even in places where persecution and suppression exist. But most importantly, notice that the stone, Jesus, strikes the image at its feet. Where does Jesus hit the image? He hits the image at the Roman Empire. That's where the strike happens. And there's this great quote from Durant. Some of you, I'm sure, have heard me quote this before, but I love this quotation. Durant writes, "There is no greater drama in human record than the sight of a few Christians scorned or oppressed by a succession of emperors, bearing all trials with fierce tenacity, multiplying quietly, building order while their enemies generated chaos, fighting the sword with the word, brutality with hope, and at last defeating the strongest state that history has known. Caesar and Christ had met in the arena, and Christ had won." Jesus and his church conquered the unconquerable. And it's because of the spread of Christianity that ultimately the Roman Empire, at least in the West, collapsed in 476 AD. And it's because of this history of persecution that eventually led to the change of this empire. I really appreciate Durant's quote because it lines up exactly with what we're seeing in Daniel chapter 2. Caesar and Christ had met in the arena, and Christ had won. All right, I'm done. Any questions or comments? I wanted to be sure I got through all my material tonight, so I saved your comments for the end. Darrell, how many slides do I need to go back, Darrell?
No, I think we can
Okay.
make it through.
All right, go ahead.
I just thought it was interesting there. His difficult thing that the king requests, and there's no other who can tell it to the king except the gods. His dwelling is not with flesh.
Yeah.
I was thinking about Jesus dwelling with us. I thought that was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then later, kind of the same thing. Daniel answered the presence of the king and said, "The secret which the king has demanded, the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, and the soothsayers cannot declare to the king, but there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets and is made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what your latter days will be." And talks about the vision. Then he says, but as for me, this secret has not been revealed to me because I have more wisdom. He's
Yeah.
showing humility there.
Yeah.
Than anyone living, but for our sakes who make known the interpretation of the king, and that you may know the thoughts of your heart. I just thought those verses kind of jumped out at me.
Yeah, I had those in my slides, but I wasn't sure I was going to be able to get through all that stuff at the end. So I felt like I needed to get through the interpretation. But yeah, I love what Daniel says to Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah.
And I love the prayer that Daniel offers after he's given the dream and the interpretation. It's wonderful, and I love what he says to Nebuchadnezzar too.
You talk about
So good.
humility.
Oh,
You know,
Yeah.
and then he was doing it to save the others.
Yeah.
You know?
yeah,
So you gotta kind of wonder when someone says, these dreams are not available to the gods who don't dwell with us in flesh.
yeah,
And then God does declare it.
Yeah.
I mean, that, you know, what's going through their brains, you
Yeah.
know, thinking about.
It's such a great point. Daniel asked for the interpretation so that he could save the lives
Yeah.
of astrologers.
Yeah.
I mean, that tells you something about the character of this
Oh,
man,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't want to see those people put to death. There was mercy and compassion there. So yeah, it's a great point. Great point. Yeah. Anything else? All right. Well, we'll close there. Charles got an unclouded day selected for our invitation tonight, and of course, this song talks about the hope that we have in Jesus Christ, that one day Jesus will return on a cloud and take us to a place where I don't think there'll be any clouds any longer, right? All we see depicted in the book of Revelation is light. And Jesus Christ has died so that is possible for all of us. And if we can help anyone here or anyone online, please tell us how as we stand and sing.
Sing all 4 verses. Oh, they tell me of a home far beyond the skies. Oh, they tell me of a home far away. Oh, they tell me of a home where no storm clouds rise. Oh, they tell me of an unclouded day. Oh, the land of cloudless day. Oh, the land of an unclouded sky. Oh, they tell me of a home where no storm clouds rise. Oh, they tell me of an unclouded day. Oh, they tell me of the home where the saints have gone. Oh, they tell me of the land far away, where the tree of life in eternal bloom sheds its fragrance through the unclouded day. Oh, the land of cloudless day. Oh, the land of an unclouded sky. Oh, they tell me of a home where no storm clouds rise. Oh, they tell me of an unclouded day. Oh, they tell me of the King in his beauty there. And they tell me that my eyes shall behold, where he sat on the throne that is whiter than snow, in the city that is made of gold. Oh, the land of cloudless day. Oh, the land of an unclouded sky. Oh, they tell me of a home where no storm clouds rise. Oh, they tell me of an unclouded day. Oh, they tell me that he smiles on his children there, and his smile drives their sorrows all away. And they tell me that no tears ever come